Carla, thank you very much for taking
There we
time
go.
today. We can start with your introduction.
Yeah, and thanks for having me here and for the invite. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So my name is Carla. I am a DevRel Program Manager at Miro. And I've been in DevRel for around 6 years now. So I joined back in 2016, working for a low-code company called OutSystems. And I started off as a community manager, but the community was developers. And I kind of was like, oh, I like this. I can relate to this kind of profile. There's not like marketing fluff, like people are just honest. And I really enjoyed it. So I kind of stayed around in the industry. I was in some other communities managing, and then in 2018, 19, I was at Hoopy, which was a really cool experience because I changed from community management to doing research and doing a bit of consultancy together with Matthew. And that was really cool. It was very insightful to understand, okay, how do developers think? How can we learn more from them? And then how to build strategies based on that, which I really enjoyed. Then I actually took a little bit of a break from the DevRel industry for 2 years. I kind of wanted to explore a bit of growth, program manager, and that kind of led me to now. So from May this year, of joining Miro as DevRel Program Manager. So managed to kind of join the two worlds, which was pretty cool.
I know that you have a really good experience with DevRel. DevRel as a bigger umbrella, it could mean for different company. And also it can include a community, event, strategy, education, developer education, technical writing. How do you measure kind of like, hey, kind of a success of DevRel from a bigger picture point of view?
So I think, like you said, I would start by saying that it depends a little bit on what the goal is, right? Because so there's four pillars on education, kind of support, awareness, community, and it depends what you're focusing on. So for example, I'd say if you're more on kind of outreach and the awareness side, you want to bring developers to your portal, to using your tool, right? But you're trying to introduce them something new that they can use. So for example, there you might be looking at some more of the traditional marketing metrics like website visitors, impressions, kind of word of mouth. But then if, for example, if you look also at so I like to think of the different pillars and the funnel as well a little bit. So from a funnel point of view, if you're looking at acquisitions, it's signups, registrations, and so on. If you want them to join the product, to be active with it, then you're looking at API calls or apps built. And then more on the community pillar, which I guess is a little bit connected to retention. It would be how active are people? Are they also contributing? There's a lot of companies that what they want to do is also through community have almost like an extended team. So you can only do so much, right, as a team. And with the power of a group of people in a community, they can create more things that you wouldn't necessarily have the time to. And then I don't see this as much. But if we're looking from more like company revenue kind of point of view, I think a good way to understand the success can be looking at how many of those were influenced by work that the developer relations team did.
Yeah, that's great.
So there's I don't think there is a one answer. I think it really depends on what you're trying to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In a nutshell, you're trying to see, hey, what your company goal is, trying to align if you can meet that expectation. If you want to get more leads from a marketing point of view, it's more like how much impact you as a DevRel team is bringing in terms of, so it can be leads, or it can be signups, or it can be activation, or you want to, like you said, it's more on a community or retention focused, where you can invest more on a community where you can get more champions or ambassadors where they can kind of accelerate your product, talk about your product, blog post, so they can accelerate your effort instead of you being in all the places.
Exactly. And I think there's also, I mean, we all know, or I'd like to think that, but DevRel works on a lot of different kind of, let's call it boxes, right? If there's a company, I don't think this would ever be the sole purpose, but of getting feedback from the developers on a product, that's also something that can be very important and valuable, right? So understanding how valuable is it, how do people interact with it, and then being able to learn, adapt, and improve from that, let's say, it's also valuable. So I think it really depends. I think at the end of the day, and I remember back in 2017, 2018, there were a lot of conversations about metrics and how do we measure success? How do we prove kind of that we're worth the investment, let's say? And DevRel is also known for, you go to events, you're evangelizing a lot of the work from the developer advocates. And that's something that's hard to measure, right? Because there's so many different things going on, and it takes a long time to see the value, right? A lot of these things are long-term. So I think you need to focus on things that you can measure. And sometimes it will take longer to see the results because these things are not short-term. If you're building relationships, if you're getting feedback, if you're attending events, like up until people actually feel a connection with the product, that will take time. And I think that's a bit of the tricky part, and often when you're trying to justify the need to have a developer relations team, how do you make the case, right? Because we know that if there's a board meeting, they want to see the results right away. I also think that it's important to be able to connect the metrics and what success means within DevRel and within a company context, because at the end of the day, everyone's under the same umbrella, right? We're all working for the same goal. We just approach it different ways to have a more diverse kind of strategy or approach. But it's easier to look at the same things because then the conversations when explaining the value will also be a little bit easier because everyone is speaking the same language.
Agree with you. And I totally align with you on that community, the product feedback. When my day at Contentful, I was a tech product manager, and the amount of insights you get from a community developer was, I was able to get a pair programming session set up, scheduled, and able to see on a real project and real use case how they're using our product. And I was getting valuable feedback from them. And it was like, it's eye-opening things for our product team when I was showing that videos and they were joining the pair programming session.
Yeah,
that's a great kind of advantage when you have a strong community, and you can have so much to learn from the community, and also the community is willing to share that kind of an advantage. You cannot copy it easily because you got such a strong community.
Yeah. I'm curious, what was the most surprising thing you learned when doing that?
We were investing a lot of time on documentation, developer documentation. And what I figured out that the senior developer was never looking into the documentation, but he was using a TypeScript, and the TypeScript itself gives you a type with all the things the developer needs to know in the code editor itself.
Yeah.
And never visited the documentation. And he was expecting our type system to be up to date and correct. So that's kind of a documentation for a developer. And the developer doesn't want to switch between a browser and the editor, and you want to get things done quickly. That was a kind of eye-opening for us because we were thinking that the documentation is the highest priority and we wanted to work on. And if we didn't see their journey, how they build an application, we wouldn't have known we need to optimize the type system. We need to provide a proper documentation on the type system. That was a big eye-opener. And also the tool chain they use and what all the tool chains they use and what we provide was a little bit different. And we were thinking that this is just enough, but no, I think the problem I had was I did a lot of user interviews and they don't talk all those things when they're doing the user interviews.
Yeah.
But when you see on the pair programming, and you ask them to speak aloud, like, hey, can you tell me why you made that choice? Can you tell me? And then like, hey, this is easy. I just do it. I don't need to look into the documentation. And you kind of uncover a lot of things. And that's a great opportunity. And luckily I had a lot of community members who would love to talk with the product team. And also it was quite easy to schedule a call and get it done. Yeah. And other thing, like the point you mentioned about the metric is a very kind of a debatable topic. And I had a similar conversation with one of our product lead. It's like metric is always like you want to lose your weight, and it's not going to happen in 1 month. It can happen in 6 months or 1 year, depending on how much you put. But what you can measure is something, how much time you spent on exercising every day, that you can measure. You should focus on yourself, that. But on a long term, you can tell to the company that you need to wait for 6 months to see a result. It's not going to happen in this quarter, or it's not going to happen in this month, but you need to wait for at least 2 quarters to see a change, a noticeable change. And don't measure that 6 months and see it yourself as a failure, and kind of differentiate the leading indicator and lagging indicator. And exactly like you said, it's like define what's the metric for a company and what's the metric for your DevRel team, and be explicit about, hey, you're not going to see that a drastic result because of events. We're not going to get a huge leads, and we're not going to win a lot of sales. The process is going to take time, and we need to have kind of a patience and look at what's the thing we're going to measure for now. What are the leading indicators and what are the lagging indicators? Having a clear distinction and alignment with the stakeholders kind of establishes a clear metric what we want to measure. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I even think that a good exercise to do, and this is something that you can do just within the team, and you don't need to report on it or actively promote it, but you know that there's certain things that you want to have an impact, right? But you're not there yet. But it's also a good exercise to start looking at the impact on those kind of metrics right now with the things that you're doing. It doesn't mean you need to share them, but you can start understanding what moves the needle. And that will also then put you in a position that 6 months down the line, you know what to expect, and you understand how things work a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. My question is to you, like, I think you spent your time at Hoopy. What do you think as like biggest kind of takeaway for you from if you, as a tech company or a SaaS company, you wanted to be present as a DevRel team in those events? Like, what do you take out from those events as a metric, apart from leads or potential leads you're going to get?
So I think, well, but do you mean for DevRelCon or for developer conferences? Because I think it's generally a bit different.
It's generally for, because it's different for DevRelCon, but I'm looking for more from a general conference where you would like to attend it from a developer conference, or it can be a JavaScript conference or conference. Yeah.
So again, it depends what is your goal, right? So 2 of the main things would be to raise awareness. And this will take a while. And there's even a term for this, that you need to see something 3 to 4 times, like a product, up until you start recognizing and you're open to hearing from it, because you're familiar with it. And that's important. But that also it's also a high cost approach to this, right? Because if you're sponsoring events, if you have a booth, that means it's money in sponsorships, it's money in swag and in all the materials, it's resources that need to be there and are not working on anything. So it's also a bit sometimes of a scary like number to invest in, but it's again a little bit of a long term. So you have this awareness kind of play, and then you can try to do initiatives and specific activities to help more on the acquisition side. But this you need to prepare for the conference a little bit better. You need to already have like coding challenges, for example, or a contest prepared, that you find a way that you can interact with someone and have like a follow-up from that then you are interacting with them still digitally. And that's a bit hard to do for the masses, but I mean, if you I think all of us that have gone to different developer conferences, there's crazy ways of doing that, right? If it's for giving out food or some kind of like prizes or challenges that are very like puzzles and people just like to go and kind of spend time, or more like fun games that people can do, that can work really well. And I think even like a mix of both can be healthy, because you're then making a more lasting impression, which means that you're increasing the impact of the time that you're spending there.
Yeah, makes sense. Do you have any kind of metric you kind of quantify the awareness, kind of a number of tweets or number of any kind of indicator where like, hey, kind of we are making kind of increasing our awareness about our tool?
So
not just on the leads part, like not just on the leads part, just on a brand awareness. The one you mentioned about, you need to kind of see that a brand 3 to 4 times, and you kind of see it familiar with that tool, and I want to give it a try because I see in all the developer conference that tool. Let me give it a try.
yeah. And I think also after you see it, so you go to a conference, you're going to go to the tools that you're familiar with or that you're curious about, but also that curiosity came from somewhere, right? It was nurtured from a part, I think. And so to your question, tweets is interesting, but I don't think it would be the key one. I think there's two things. So one of them is trying to see how to bring people from the in-person up into like a digital home, right? And for example, if you have challenges that people need to subscribe somewhere or to go somewhere, then you can look at page views, you can look at signups or registering for the contest, for example, which give you a pretty good, accurate data on that. And then you can start understanding, okay, so the other part is looking at how many people were attending the conference. You can kind of try to estimate on, okay, if we can have X amount of conversations per hour, there's X amount of people working the booth. So what does that equate to? And then also kind of try to differentiate kind of the quick conversations or longer one that you start building a relationship with the person. It's hard to be able to quantify. And even though you have, conferences often give you like a badge scanner, right? So you can put some numbers behind it, but it doesn't measure the quality. And I think what you want to create is always a follow-up to be able to measure that conversion. So I think that's the most relevant bit. It's seeing from everyone that you spoke, and you can get those kind of bigger numbers. So like I said, from everyone that was there, kind of the amount of people that came to you, which even though it just, you start kind of knowing, right? And then how many people came to the digital home, how many people interacted, how many people subscribed. Then there's also the part of, okay, are you able to actually identify who the people are? Because often you don't get everyone's emails, right? But if you have contests or something like that, then you can have that. Then you can see if people are starting to become active. You can see if people are playing around with the platform, and you can start understanding the impact a little bit better.
Yeah, agree with you. And one point with respect to the conversations, I had a conversation with Twilio developer advocate, and I was curious how they measure the success of the developer events. And one of the things they mentioned about was quality conversation they have. The reason being that the person who's going to have a conversation could be a potential ambassador, or wants to start a community and build, educate, and be more developer friendly as a product, like how they can get started. And also potential customer come and see and talk to you as a company they're always fan of. This is a great opportunity kind of bridging them. And I was thinking, like, what are the 10x way we can reuse it? The one you talked about, the coding challenge, can we somehow, the amount of time we spend preparing that, can we convert them into some kind of a useful blog, or somewhere like some kind of a useful information to a developer or an audience, or tech audience, that we can leverage it not just only on this booth. We can also kind of use that as in a presentation for some other conference. Kind of, how can we reuse it? And I'm thinking of doing the same thing for example, for at our company, like we give a presentation for that. It's more on a value. It's nothing on a selling. Yeah. But how can I reuse that so that I don't need to put a new extra effort, but I can spread it to more people? And it's more like a 10x way of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I completely relate to that. And that's something that currently, like in the team at Miro, we're always thinking, how can we use this somewhere else? Because the team is not so big. So we're thinking, how do we want to do so many things? How do we invest as little as possible to make sure that we can do everything that we want to? And reusing content is definitely one of them. Contests, you can always change. You can change them a bit. You can adapt them. You can change a bit of the actual content itself, or the way of submission, or you can tell them stories from it. For example, if it's a contest to where actually there's an app that was built from it, then those can be success stories, for example, or it can be a blog article, or it can be a testimonial, or it can grow into something else. So there's for sure things that you can do. Is there any kind of example that you were looking for in particular?
Yeah, I was.
Or anything you had in mind?
Yeah, I think it was more on in terms of like, how can we leverage more? Okay, let me come back to that. I had one question I want to ask you, like, how do you decide which conference to attend? Like, there could be like thousands of conferences across the world happening, and the attention span is so less. Like, do you have like kind of a strategy where like, hey, this is where we kind of get more value, and this is where we see our users? It can be a geography, or it can be our customer base is there a lot in this European region. Are there like, how do you kind of make a choice of which event to attend, which event not to attend? And also same thing applicable for hybrid or a physical event or an online event after this pandemic?
I think you might have given the answer a little bit there, but I would definitely say so. It depends. Where is your target audience? Is it geo-based? So does it matter if it's like in a certain country? Do you want to make sure you're in London, in the UK, or maybe in Germany, or maybe in the US, right? So definitely you're going to make sure that you are investing in conferences there. And then I think the developer profile for sure. So which is it? Does it matter if it's back-end, front-end, kind of seniority levels as well? Because you'll take different things from those types of events, right? So you need to match to make sure that the people that you want to reach are actually there. And you can often do that. So when you're looking at the sponsorship perspectives from different conference organizers, they do have this kind of audience segmentation based on past events, and they tend to be quite similar. I think now with post-COVID, the data is still a bit before, so there might be a bit of changes there, but I think all in all, it's kind of what history has showed us. I think another thing is also, it's important to look at which event organizers or conferences allow you to do other things, right? So imagine that you want to have a talk, or you also want to have a workshop, or you want to have a contest that you want to take advantage of the event and work with the event organizers to kind of promote this. Or do you have reach to their developer newsletters, for example? Because they usually have this in place, and some of them offer it to sponsors and others don't. And I think that, and really to try and get the most out of your investment, you need to look how many opportunities do I have to engage with attendees. And I think that for me, that's something that's important. And as well, I particularly really like working with event organizers that are quite flexible, so that will try to understand, okay, what are you trying to achieve, and make sure that the activities that they have in place and that you can participate also allow for that.
Yeah, I really like kind of a thing you mentioned about it should be flexible. It's not just only a flyer, what you get, gold, silver, bronze. Like there can be multiple ways you can engage the touch points with the audience, and how can you maximize your putting in investment? What are the ways you can maximize that? Following question to that, and also the example you gave, are there any specific challenges you kind of prefer? Like, is it a game, or is it a specific coding language challenge you kind of choose for the events? How do you kind of prioritize, and kind of how do you manage both the entertainment and a fun and interesting part, and also kind of this participation?
So I don't know if there's one that kind of stands out, because again, and I know it's a bit of a frustrating answer, but it depends what you're trying to do, right? So I think if you can build something that means you get several points of interaction with a developer, you're getting more value out of it. So you're kind of winning, right? So how can you create something that takes you through a journey where it goes a bit beyond awareness, right? So you want the person to start getting engaged, to testing out, making API calls, kind of exploring the product, and maybe you want to do like a challenge. And all of this doesn't have to happen at the same time. You can phase this out, right? So think of, for example, and I think it's often useful to do this exercise like ourselves. Like if you go to a conference, what do you enjoy? Like what is a good memory that you have of interacting with a company or a product? And I think that initiatives or kind of things you can build that last through time, that gives you more value, and you have the chance to educate the developer on the product, right? Of sharing a little bit of why it's valuable or why it can be valuable for them, right? I think what you want to do is give as much information so that then the developers can make their decision if this is something for you or not. Because I think we all know that developers will make up their own mind, and there's no persuading. We just need to put all the facts in and let them see if it's something that makes sense for them.
Got it.
One thing though and that I think people often underestimate, to at least to get people to the booth, the booths that have a lot of lines, the biggest lines, they're giving out food. And it's crazy things like popcorn or ice cream or things that you wouldn't normally think of, and things that are, this is a funny one, that are often consumed at the event. So not necessarily that they take home. And that has a really good results. I saw at We Are Developers this year, the biggest line there was for IKEA, and they were giving out ice cream.
That's a great tip. That's a great. I never looked from that angle, but yeah, that's a great. And also, the following that, do you see any trend in developer community or developer conference in the last couple of years?
I'm still trying to figure that out. So I won't give my conclusion yet, because I don't think I've made one in trends, especially since COVID. I think a lot of things definitely changed, but at the same, not that much changed. Anything that was more in person obviously changed, but I think how developers would interact with a product or consume information, not necessarily. I mean, we used to go to events before for networking, right? You would go home then and watch the talks that you didn't get to. That was normal. And people now are like, oh, but if it's online, it's just a video. It's like, people will do that too, right? It's just what you can or can't do, or the value that you want to get. You just don't get it all from the same place. One of the things that I'm curious about is, I feel like COVID has also taught us, because we had to learn how to interact with other people in a remote environment, right? And some people used to do that quite a lot, others not so much. And now we kind of all had to learn how to do that. And I think that especially when it comes to developer communities and connecting with people, has that evolved? Has the fact that we've now had to go through this and in our daily lives just be beyond, in front of the computer, in front of the camera, and find a human connection, what have we learned? from that? I'm kind of curious to see that.
Thank you. I think, and in terms of your experience with Hoopy, what are the tips you're going to share for somebody who's applying for a conference talk, call for proposals? Do you want to share any tips where chances of higher acceptance of the paper proposals?
Yeah, I think so. There's one thing you need to be aware of, which is there's always the story you want to tell, and then there's the story people want to hear. And these are not often the same. It doesn't mean they can't become the same, but I think it's also like a good exercise to make that kind of comparison and then draw the lines together to make it into a cohesive talk. I think, well, first of all, sales or marketing talks, they don't work. People are not there to be sold on something. They're spending their time to learn something, to connect with others. So what can they learn? And often we can teach from what we've done, what we've experienced. So having examples, like being able to make people relate to what you're talking or see, okay, in this situation, yes, it would be different, or I can see how this adjusts. I think that's useful. So more on the practical side than theory, because I mean, there's a lot of books on theory, right? So also, what are you there to add? I think you need to be honest, and it's really important to get the message across. So not just to the people that you'll speak to, hopefully, if you get through, but to the people that are curating the talks. And this is not such an easy exercise. One kind of tip I would give is start with doing two things. So you'll always need to do kind of an abstract or a short summary or elevator pitch, but if you start with an outline, it'll make you think of all the content you go through. And then the main takeaways or the key takeaways. So what is the message that you leave behind? And with starting by filling these two sections, it becomes easier to think, okay, so I go through all of this, and you kind of see, like, you take a step back, you see a bit of the bigger picture, and it becomes easier to then to write for the other fields.
Yeah.
And I think if you're trying to, like, oh, I really want to go to this conference, is this talk interesting? Like, you can always look at past editions, see what the topics were, how technical, how detailed were they. If you want to take it a step further, go look at social. What was mentioned the year before? What were people talking about? Because then you can also get a feeling for what was enjoyed the most.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great tip. So one, we can take inspiration from previous talks, like what were the formats and what were the most expected talks and what are the more views. And also you said from a story from a consumer point of view, not just what you want to tell. It's like from what's the value for them and how this is going to be a takeaway for the audience and they can apply in their work. And also the use cases we're going to provide, it resonates with them when we talk about it. Absolutely. I think these are great tips. I also will take personally because it makes sense. And I never thought about, we can do research like, hey, what are the organizers are expecting? Like, what are the talks they accepted last year? What are the characteristics they have? And yeah, I think that makes totally sense. And what about, like, if you look from a community-led growth, do you see there's a way to measure? Again, we talked about ROI and all, like why we should care if some SaaS company were not investing that much, still following the traditional way. Why do you think it's a time to look at community side of things, especially if we have an API or a SaaS product which is focused for builders, which are developers?
Well, I think so. You're pretty much, at the end of the day, you're building something for other people to use. If you're not connecting with them, if you don't understand if it's actually valuable, if it's solving their problems, how they feel about it, how you can help them, there's always going to be a disconnect. And I think that for us in DevRel, and I think it was Mary that said this a while back, that our role is we're advocates of the company to the developers and advocates of the developers to the community. And I think it's really making that bridge so that there is a fit. The product fits with the need that there is. And you can't really understand this need without connecting with the developers and the people that are using it, which is one of the reasons why I think that research and having just interviews and talking with people and really understanding, okay, be like, what does it help you? What's the value at the end of the day? How does this make your life easier or not? And then learn from that, adjust from that, take those learnings, share them internally, obviously put them in also the context that they have, but how can we learn from how people are using this to making something that's actually valuable? Because the more valuable it is, the more you're going to use it, the more you're going to talk about it. So the more value you're going to get as a company at the end of the day.
That's great. That's great. I totally agree on you with that. Any kind of blogs or articles or podcast you listen to stay up to date with your DevRel knowledge? Maybe you want to share with those?
There's nothing specifically I follow. I like following people. So more like people I've met or from talks that I really enjoy, and then see what they post, because they'll post about interesting stuff for them or stuff that they found interesting. And that's usually also right on the spot. So I think that just one good thing, I guess, is, for example, so a lot of the content from DevRel conferences, and speaking about DevRelCon specifically, the videos are online. And you can kind of see, okay, who's talking about things that I like? Let me see this. Let me see if if this is relevant for me. And then you can start following these people and you'll come across a world of content. And I mean, I think LinkedIn has made this so easy, or Twitter or whatever the channel might be, that it's easy to just stay up to date and also take advantage of what others are sharing. Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't have a secret formula for this one.
I agree with you, and that's also one of my knowledge base. DevRel Conf has a lot of YouTube videos, and you can watch it in a speed, and you can skip it. What are the points they're talking about? And you can watch a lot of really great talks, and you can see the different perspectives. Yeah, that's also one of my knowledge. Yeah. Do you have any kind of a story or a success story you want to share related to DevRel, which you are proud of?
No, I think so. Kind of a success story, I think and one of the reasons also why I really like the program management side of DevRel, is because you connect with different people and you learn from them, and you work with a lot of different teams and departments and so on. So I think for Dev, we all come from different backgrounds, and there's people that are a bit more technical, there's people that are a little bit less technical. And I really like how DevRel teams, and for me specifically now at Miro, we're all like excited to connect with the developers and tell them about the Miro developer platform, and we're kind of all brainstorming, okay, what can we do? What are all the different things? And we start like thinking, okay, how can we engage? And for example, the events, and we're talking about coding challenges. So, okay, how can people get to know the Web SDK and the REST API? What challenges can we do? And we're just like testing this and seeing different iterations and what can work and what not. And for me, that dynamic, I think, of people with such different backgrounds trying to make the product connect with the developers, what can grow from that? For me, it's a success. And seeing that kind of, you don't take something that doesn't work as well and see it as a failure, but rather, how can we make this better? And I think that's an important one, because it's like we were talking about earlier. There's things that they take a long time, and sometimes that can get frustrating. And I think that being able to take things in smaller kind of bits, and how can we change? What can we learn? How can we go from here? And being able to have that attitude and that mindset, I think it's really crucial for the role, especially because, like we're saying, the results can come later on.
I really like it, and that mindset also. I also working on the developer portal, and we get a tiny feedback from customer, and we take it like, how can we improve the experience? And even though it might look very small, I think if we look back at where we were 6 months before and now where we stand, there's a huge difference in experience and the kind of experience we provide. And it was only possible by making a small tweaks, getting constant feedback and taking that priority and working on it. Yeah, I think that's where we can be proud of it. And now if somebody comes, a developer, and they really appreciate that, how easy it is to use the product, the journey, the touch points are so well thought out. And if you hear the quotes from customer, I think you really feel happy. And I see that happening at our developer portal as well. Yeah, that's a good.
It's all about creating these moments of delight, right? And we have that. We feel that with, if it's professionally or not, that at the end of the day, we're human. So what can make us connect with something? And I think having those good experience and those things that, you want to tell your friends about. And then, well, part of our challenge in DevRel is how to bring that to the experience that a developer will have with the tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell me about your meetup. You are the ones, you did organized a couple of meetups at DevRel focused in Berlin. What's the future and how is it going?
So it's going well. We actually had to postpone our last one, and we'll be announcing a new date pretty soon. For me, it's a little bit actually of the end of a page and handing it over, because I just moved from Berlin to Amsterdam. So, but it will continue. And I think the goal, especially now that, it's not so dangerous to be out there with COVID and restrictions are easing up, and people are also feeling more comfortable with, and they want to connect again, being able to have those moments when we can all come together and discuss, because there's not a lot of people that understand the multifaceted world of developer relations. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of interactions. There's a lot of things that we look at, and it's nice to sometimes be able to hear from someone else's experience. And I think one thing I really appreciate about DevRel as a group of people is that we don't really hesitate to share things. I mean, of course, there's certain things that is more sensitive and due to data sensitivity, but everyone is very helpful. They try to, what can we learn and how can you help someone else?
Thank you very much, Carla, and it was